Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of HazChat presented by Hazmat 101 Consultants. I'm one of your co-hosts, Bob Koshik-Nano, with my other co-host, Derek Shawman. Hello, pal.
Hello. How are you doing?
Good, and yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Having a good week and, looking forward to the weekend.
Awesome. Before we get started, I got to say, please, if you're watching this, make sure you subscribe. Click on that little button right there on the website, on the YouTube channel, wherever you happen to find us, and make sure you subscribe to us. And with that being said, yeah, it's been busy. We've been, let's see, where were we just at? We were at the Michigan conference. We're about to be going to Oklahoma conference here in a matter of weeks. Different things, different times, we're all over the place. We are not jet setters. Well, I guess kind of jet setters. We don't have the private plane yet. I know our other cohort in crime, Mike Pulaski, wants us to get a jet, and we may need a few more gigs for that before we upgrade.
Just a few. That actually reminds me, I got to book some flights here.
We do. Oh, that's right. We do. We do have to book something very important, Baltimore. So make sure you come to Baltimore and check us out. We're going to be there for the week, having a good time, seeing friends, meeting new ones, and getting our learn, and hopefully passing out some information to use guys out there. So, all right, without further ado, today we're going to talk a little bit about, there was an incident in the Southeast at a hotel where a carbon dioxide, not to be confused with carbon monoxide, because some people change those words around rather easily. We obviously know they're two different things, but had a carbon dioxide tank that was outside explode. And I think it was behind what might be like the restaurant type area of the hotel. And it's kind of interesting because this call, the way it was expressed to me by several people, was that it came in as a helicopter crash, an explosion, just like a whole host of different type situations all at once. So really the first two crews didn't know what they had until they got there. Having been on something similar where we had a gas called carbohydrolium, which we'll talk about in another episode. We had reports of multiple explosions from a building downtown. And, that time of the year was actually September post 9/11. So everybody was kind of freaking out. So, the thing is, just because what it says on your data terminal or over the headset doesn't necessarily mean it is what it is, right, D?
Exactly. Callers are never giving us partial information or misleading information, but the reality is any incident like this, people are reacting to what they experienced, and without having full information, their understanding of the event may be skewing them one way or another. If you saw something in the area and then you hear something, you automatically assume that the two are related. So always go into calls, with a little bit of skepticism as to what you've been dispatched to, what you've gone to. And, you hear reports of something like an explosion. The first thing I'm looking for is, do I have a column of smoke?
Right.
Because when I hear explosion, I'm thinking incendiary event. Something has occurred and there is a fire potential, and you have that whole aspect in addition to the EOD response, in addition to the hazmat response, in addition to possibly filling out an MCI. So
yeah,
explosion tends to lead us in one direction, whether we have a report of a large vehicle crash, apartment fire, anything. Everyone has some sort of playbook. You got your SOPs, your SOGs that kind of guide where you're going. And that's where we have to remain flexible and modify our approach and change our dispatch to accommodate as more information's coming in.
Yeah. Hey, that brings up a good point. I think maybe next month we will do the show about the carbohydrolium, because with that explosion, there was none of what you were just talking about. And without tipping our hat too much, it looked like a gas explosion, but there was a lot of signs that were not really dictating that. So we'll that's a good one. Let's table that till next month. That's a good one for next month. So what we got here, real quickly, we're just going to bring up the properties, and this is just a quick snapshot off of the NIOSH book. So there's a few things here just for people to remember. What do we know carbon dioxide is? Okay, we know it's not flammable, it's an asphyxiant, but some of the other things to keep in mind, is that it's heavier than air, so it's going to sink, right? Its IP is well over 13. So Derek, what kind of metering devices would you bring into a suspected carbon dioxide leak from hotel, restaurant, whatever?
So it brings up a good point. One of the things that we talked about was, do we want to carry maybe a single sensor, carbon dioxide? That way we're doing a direct read. As of right now, really the main tool that you have available to you is your multi-gas, using your oxygen sensor to look for a displacement of oxygen. But we're talking about significant amounts of product when we talk about displacing oxygen. But ultimately, that helps to let us know as far as the safety factors there. So a direct read CO2 sensor would be perfect for that situation. Obviously, the ionization potential means that we're not going to use a PID for that. A lot of our devices kind of get taken out of play there, but really what most agencies would have that could give them some indication is looking for that displacement of oxygen. Am I getting reduced readings, even if it's 0.2%? If the outside air was 20.9 or 20.8, depending on what manufacturer you're using, MSA, if you see a change of 0.2%, that's more than just a standard atmospheric fluctuation. That's something is happening that's displacing oxygen.
Right. And with that, is there anything else besides a single sensor, CO2, and your oxygen sensor?
Well, I'd also look for, a lot of these facilities actually have a CO2 alarm that will be activated and flashing light outside of the occupancy.
We call that a clue, folks. In case you didn't know, that's a big clue. Don't walk by that little red light going off or that little noisemaker with no mask on and walk into a restaurant, as I witnessed one day. Sorry, carry on.
and it's not necessarily something you're going to see everywhere. I've seen some facilities that have them, some that don't. Bob and I talk about the differences in how we store carbon dioxide down in the South versus how it's stored up north typically. So a lot of ours is going to be outdoors, which reduces that potential for asphyxiation and incident, because it is being vented out to the larger atmosphere. I know in the past, about 15, maybe 20 years ago, there were some incidents, even with outdoor CO2 storage, where, because it was in an outdoor area, that area also had high cinder block walls, no roof, but there was accumulation of gas in there, and there were some fatalities that occurred in Central Florida due to that, when CO2 was being delivered, and unfortunately there was a leak and workers were fatally affected by that. So being outside is, yes, better, but it doesn't eliminate the hazard.
And it's funny you say outside too, because it was, as everybody knows, we're in the Central Florida area, and if you didn't know, you know now. They just built a Wendy's not too far from me, and it's almost like a enclosed structure, if you will, that has vents, but the tanks are there and there's connection points for the driver. And so it's somewhat vented, but it is exterior from everybody else. So it was part of the new construction that they were doing. So kind of cool. Something to think about, look at. So with that said, let's drop down to the first picture of the incident that we're talking about. I'm sorry, not the first picture, but an example of, and this is a smaller CO2 tank on the exterior of a building. A lot of these that we have in restaurants, especially, are much taller, carry a lot more product, and some may even have 2, 3, 4 of these things. So just to kind of give you an idea, what some of these doers look like. And then next, this is an interesting one. Derek's got a quick story on this in a second, but you have a lot of businesses that, like I just mentioned, the newer construction just has a hookup for this one restaurant. Here's one where it goes into a building, and Derek can talk a little bit about something that happened with one of those.
Yeah, so I'm sure that everyone's familiar with carbon dioxide. If you're not, obviously it's one of those unique chemicals that goes through a physical state change known as sublimation, where it goes from either being a solid directly to a gas. It does not have a liquid phase at atmospheric pressure. That's where when we get into the dewars, those dewars are not at atmospheric pressure, which is why we're able to actually have liquefied carbon dioxide at that point. The picture here is from an incident where a connection was made on the exterior of the building that tied into the dewar that was interior. So the delivery person came as normal on his schedule, connected to it, and began running product in to top off the dewar. Now, his system was designed that it should automatically cut itself off. And for some reason, it did not. And he got distracted and continued to do some other things instead of being attentive to his equipment.
And it was for over several minutes, right?
Yes. And the way that this call was received was a report of a person down. So there was an elderly female who was found unconscious in the bathroom of the restaurant where this was occurring. And she had collapsed on the floor. Family had realized she left the table, been gone for a while. As they approached, they noticed a fog coming from the bathroom. Opened the door, found her, pulled her out. Fortunately, she was fine. There no lasting effects of it, just a little bit of displacement of oxygen. And they got there quickly enough to help her. But long story short, this occupancy had recently changed. It went from being one restaurant to another, and in the process of that change, they relocated their fountain system, which also resulted in relocating their CO2 dewar that was inside. So they made a new connection on the other side of the building, and this connection was disconnected. Unfortunately, the wall box that you see here was still in place. The driver was not aware of the change, had been hooking up to this location forever. And on the other side of this wall, basically they just drywalled over that open connection. And that's where the bathrooms were installed.
Wow.
So come to find out, he had been just pumping carbon dioxide into a void space between studs and drywall. And my crew came on shift the next day, got the pass on from the previous crew, which was C shift. And we went out to monitor because they shut the facility down. In an effort to not do damage, they determined that they weren't going to open up the walls, anything. The business was fine with shutting down. And at that point, the tactic was let it naturally convert to gas and dissipate. So we went in around 10 o'clock in the morning the next day. And this happened, I want to say, around 5, 6 p.m. the previous day. Went in with a thermal imaging camera and noticed a very cold spot still in the wall. So we knew we still had product. We were still getting oxygen displacement in that bathroom. Not significant, but enough that we could see a difference between the open space and everything else. So essentially what we had was a block of dry ice. Him pumping the product into there, which was a liquid, but now it's hitting atmospheric pressure. It's cold enough that it's solidified, and he basically created a chunk of dry ice that was about, if you figure the studs were 16-inch center and probably about 9 feet high and about 4 feet thick. So there's a pretty big block of dry ice in that wall that it took, I want to say, more than 48 hours for it to finally dissipate. But
hell, that was almost like their walk-in freezer.
Yeah, it was. You could definitely notice the difference in the temperature when you walked in.
Yeah, sure.
You walked into that bathroom, it was like, toilet seats are already cold enough. We don't need to make it any worse.
Yeah, that was a good one. So on to this incident. So like I said, this is at a hotel, the backside of it. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, there was all kinds of reports of, this or that, what it could be. And so, first arriving units on the scene see this, but again, as Derek mentioned, you got to be looking for that smoke, that fire, the other signs that would make it some kind of incendiary type explosion, as Derek mentioned. So once they did their walk around and they got a little closer, they started seeing some more damage of the interior as well. Obviously, when the crews got there, they made sure that they had an all clear, or what a lot of departments, including ours, consider an all clear. It was evacuated. There was nobody in there, but more importantly, nobody hurt. And they were able to do that in pretty quick fashion. And then after moving through, now here's the exterior. So, you talk about these things blowing up inside. Look what this thing did on the outside to some extent. I mean, that wall was just torn apart. So, while it's
a lot of energy.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of energy. You don't have to have, and that's a good point, because a lot of people don't realize you don't have to have fire to have a lot of energy to do damage like that. It kind of reminds me when I was still on the job and we went to, like Derek did with our EOD response, and they would shoot something with their water cannon. That's high velocity stuff that just blows a package or whatever the case may be apart. So, this is, and now these tanks are metal. So you got shrapnel going in different places, obviously. So that took out, and we don't know the exact size of the tank. So we'll try to get that information and post it in the show notes eventually. But just by the size of it, I'm going to say that was a decent sized tank, especially if it was running by itself or in conjunction with something else, the restaurant of a hotel. I would think it'd have to have a lot of volume.
Yeah, I agree. And there's, I know that this specific event was covered by the local news media. So
Yes.
there's information there. There's an investigation underway to determine exactly what may have happened here. And it definitely makes you appreciate the amount of stored energy, the amount of potential energy in these dewars. Because when we think about dewars, most of them are probably about 4 foot high. The ones that we encounter the most, about 4 or 5 foot high at the most. They have a diameter of maybe about 18 to 20 inches. And, they're pressure vessels, but they're not the high pressure cylinders that we think about a lot of times,
Right.
like when we talk about propane or nitrogen or anything like that. Or, no, so, don't be lulled into that false sense of security of that, because it's what we would consider a somewhat inert product. I mean, obviously there's the asphyxiation hazard. Every cylinder, every storage container you see that's under pressure has potential energy. And this is a great example of the potential when it
Yeah.
gets released.
Yeah. And don't crowd everybody up there. Send a limited amount of people to do the recon. You don't need to have the whole engine company, truck company, whomever, 1 or 2 guys. That's it. That's all you need to go up there and do a recon. And when you're doing that, make sure that you're expressing where you're at while you're doing that recon. So God forbid something does happen, you know exactly where it needs to respond to. So the next one, again, is a little bit more of how big of a hole that is. And again, these are all pictures from the local news media showing just the sheer volume of that. I mean, that's 2/3, well, a little bit more than half of the wall, concrete block wall, as a matter of fact.
Which then you also have to look into, what is my structural integrity? Like,
Yep.
in addition to, if I've still got an active release, let's say that this is another product. It's not CO2, or it is CO2, but there's some other things that are still going on that need to be taken care of. What's the stability of that wall? Is that structure safe for us to work around? What's on the other side of that wall? electrical utilities, gas utilities, all those things that may not have been part of your initial incident can also be affected and impacted. So the utilities would be a big concern because that may be a secondary incident if you're not careful.
Yep, absolutely. Good point. Good point. And then lastly, just another view from this is kind of like a gate to explain. This is kind of like a exterior area with a gate that leads to the exterior of the building is the way I interpret the pictures that I've seen. And so that's just another view. And I mean, that's look how some of that blockwork shot out like that. Good God. That's crazy. So, you know, you can have people trapped underneath the debris. You can have people trapped inside where you saw some of the debris. We're not going to get into a whole big fire tactics on this, but just some things to consider and talk about, because these are instances that, while they don't happen all the time, you know, a lot of these things come in as medical alarms, you know, like Derek said with the one he had, the one that is well known in Phoenix that's on YouTube. You know, that one was in the basement and the guys were going downstairs to investigate, and the call was a woman had fallen down. And when the crews went in there, they started, you know, getting lightheaded because they were investigating where she fell to see how high you know, what the height was that she had fallen from, and they started getting dizzy. So, you know, I can't emphasize enough with these. Don't be complacent. If you go to these calls, especially if these tanks are inside, put your mask on, because why, Derek?
Because air is free.
Oh, that's right. Air's free. Never seen a credit card swipe machine on the side of a Cascade fill station, as you've heard us say many times. Put your mask on, because by the time you realize you're lightheaded, it's too late, or worse. It could drop down instantaneously in an area just when you turn a corner and walk into another room of some sort, and now you're unconscious. So they give you a PPE for a reason. I'll stop beating that horse and, do the right thing.
And understand too that something as simple as CO2 is very prevalent. It's in a lot of areas. It's in restaurants, it's in bars.
Good point.
It's going to be anywhere there's a soda fountain, basically, you're going to have CO2. You've got some other places that may be using it for other reasons. And a lot of the employees at these facilities, they're so accustomed to it being there, they're not viewing it as a hazardous material.
Right.
They're not viewing the risk that it poses. To them, it's just a big stainless steel tank that is hooked up to run their soda machines. And when the carbonation of the soda machine is not working properly, it's probably something wrong with that tank. Yeah. So they may not give it the same respect that they would something like a propane tank, or even their cleanings products, things like that. So you want to look out for things like when you're doing maybe your company surveys or your hazmat site surveys, look at where they're stored. Is it stored in a way that is appropriate for that product, where you can gain access to it, that nothing's being placed on top of it, placed around it? Because these dewars, they do have their valve assemblies on top. There's a protective ring over top of them. And they actually have a redundant system of a pressure relief valve and a burst disc. But again, you know, it's the same thing that we see with water heaters and people's homes, that things start getting stacked on top of it. Or you go into a business to do a company survey and you see boxes of flammable materials have been moved into the electrical room because it's a great storage area. Right. So, you know, being mindful of those things, because the safety devices on these is very much reliant on proper condition and proper maintenance, and not having any kind of an external impact or interference with them functioning the way they're supposed to.
Very, very good point. Very good point, my friend, as always. As always. And before we go, don't forget to subscribe right there. Go to the YouTube channel, click on it, because you want to be alerted when every episode drops. Be the first in your family to listen to us for that month.
Be cool. Don't be lame and just watch and never subscribe.
Be part of the cool kid group, as some of our friends say. Anything else, my friend, before we say goodbye?
No, we're going to be heading to Oklahoma in May.
Mm-hmm.
for their hazmat conference, and then after that, we'll be heading up to Baltimore. So I just got to book some flights and look forward to hopefully seeing some people there. And if you watch this Has Chat, when you see us out there, just let us know. Hey, we watch it, and let us know. Hey, we love it, or your head's too shiny, Derek. You need to do something about putting some powder on your forehead so the light's not reflecting off it. Whatever you can think of.
It's funny you say that, because I will say that the light in my studio definitely makes me not look as tan as I actually am. So I'm gonna have to address that, because anybody that knows me knows I play golf and I've got quite the Florida tan going on, besides being Italian. So, all right. And before we go, let's just throw it in there. Hazmat HQ magazine drops just either the last day of the month or the first day of the new month. But we've got a lot of great information, a lot of great content in there. If you'd like to be a contributor, please shoot us an email. You can shoot it at bob@hazmat101consultants.com, or better yet, click on the website hazmathq.com. We have links in the last episode for emails for submitting articles and information for the editors and so on. Great stuff. A lot of names you'll recognize, and we've got some new people throwing some articles in there too, because we want everybody to be able to share what they got. It's about helping everybody up, and we got new blood coming in, man. So the new and the old and all of us in between, and bottom line is share the information. So
yeah, I want a nice tight knit community that's there to support each other.
Oh yeah. That's fantastic. And then lastly, before we head out, social media. Hazmat 101 Consultants on Facebook and YouTube and web, obviously. The Hazmat Guys Roundtable, first Tuesday of every month, 8 p.m. Eastern. You'll see my ugly mug along with Bobby and Mike and Jeff Scientech live show. Check it out. Hazmat Group 2, Hazmat Group, and Common Sense. All great places to get information, ask questions, so on and so forth. And with that, I got nothing else.
No, think we got another one in the can, and let's get out of here.
All right, everybody, be safe, and we will see you soon.